Welcome to the Guan Jing Method YouTube channel, and today I'm so excited. We're going to be doing something a little out of the ordinary, which is have a beautiful conversation about unlocking biogeometry, the spiraling circular shapes found in energy, biogeometry signatures, and their importance on emotions and the chakra system. And sitting with me is the world-renowned Adam Fallon. Please tell me more about yourself.
Well, my name is Adam, and for a long time, for the last about 15 years, I've been a professional musician and producer and played for all sorts of amazing, incredible, world-renowned artists, and just had a blessing through that process. But in that, I went through quite an awakening of getting burnt out just from starting at a very early age of touring and going all over the world, and also living in New York City. I got to a point where I really just needed to downregulate my nervous system, and I didn't have the language for that at that moment. But having a background of growing up with like a holistic health doctor and chiropractor, that really planted a lot of seeds for me about the system that we live in and how we can actually really generate our own vitality and health through certain practices. That came back online through an awakening where I was working with a shaman that allowed me to see that healing was part of my path. And I didn't know what to make of that at that point, but I decided to go and listen to my heart's calling and go down the deep rabbit hole of discovering what it is that I'm here to do. And that really ended me up studying with Paul Chek at the Chek Institute and becoming certified as a level 2 holistic health practitioner and integrated movement specialist, and really worked through that practice quite a bit for myself and working with practitioners and really healing my own body to the point where then I started to offer it to clients. And through that work, it's been nothing but amazing. But then it just kept getting deeper and deeper, and almost full circle moment brought me back to the aspects of vibrational healing in the energetic body, and just how so much of what we consider physical ailments starts on different dimensions and different dimensional levels. And that helped me really rediscover the importance of vibration and frequency and music through biogeometry, which is what I've been studying now, which is, we'll get into exactly what that is, but I'm in the process of becoming a practitioner, and it is something that has changed my life so deeply that I can't help but dedicate a lot of my time and energy towards bringing this information to more people that will hopefully benefit from it, because I believe it's one of the most powerful rememberings of so much of the ancient technology that so many different systems embody. And I really think it interfaces a lot with your work, and I'm really excited to share it. And yeah, it's just been nothing but amazing too, just seeing that in combination with now applying all the holistic health principles and getting grounded and getting into the physical body and posture and all of those different aspects of a really grounded approach, but then also working on the energetics and the different mental, emotional, spiritual levels as well.
Yeah, and that's why our work together, I feel like so called to collaborate and to be in this conversation, because I feel like there's definitely emergence between everything in nature, which is a pattern of sacred geometry, which creates the structure of the physical body. And so, you know, with Guan Jing and how I created this movement form, it is all based on spiraling circular shapes found in nature. And when we repeat these patterns and when we do this in a group, it creates an energetic sacred geometry and also an internal movement of spirals and an internal expansion of patterns, and moving that blocked, stagnant energy so that we can be in flow, we can be our most prosperous selves, we can be our happiest, our healthiest.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And so I'm really excited to dive into the fun, nitty-gritty, mystical aspects of biogeometry. So first of all, what is a biogeometry signature?
I would say the biosignatures, which is a system that's completely unique to biogeometry that Ibrahim Karim developed, it really is a mapping of all the energetic signatures that already are part of our natural innate human body. But he spent over 40 years of mapping out all the unique energetic lines that go throughout the shape and determine the actual function of the organ, and started to realize that once he mapped these out, that there were certain people that had gone through maybe emotional disturbances or different things that may have thrown off that energetic signature. And so by helping people's body remember that actual signature through either projecting or drawing or dancing it, as we'll talk about, and all of these different ways of accessing it, it really allowed the body to key back into the original unified state that it naturally comes from. And many times there's been so much incredible work too with the biosignatures when it comes to different research projects with things like hepatitis C and different disease processes. And they really are very clear that they make no medical claims, but it really comes down to an environmental energy balancing, because really everything is part of our environment and we are part of our environment. And it's incredible because it really, a lot of these signatures too emanate what is called the BG3, which I can get into right now. It is the 3 energy qualities that Ibrahim found through tons and tons of study and empirical evidence that he found through looking at all the different sacred power spots and all of the different ways of a lot of these ancient civilizations that actually built their entire cities around all these incredible sacred power spots. And he found that they had 3 energy qualities.
Wait, so pause really quick. So these sacred energy spots are essentially different geological locations in the world. And would you say that these are the same spots where people would call like the chakra system of the world? Or
yes,
like
it's very similar to that. You know, a lot of people really talk about like Giza Plateau or Mount Shasta and all these different places in the world that have this sacred energy, and it's really like a chakra of the world. But there's also so many different power spots and so many levels of that. Like there's a lot of major power spots, but there's also, you know, there's certain spring waters that have certain vortexes. And really what he talks about, a lot of what these sacred power spots are, they're multidimensional vortexes. And so they have certain energy qualities that a lot of the different ancient ways in indigenous cultures, they would actually mark these spots with stones or find them through animals. And of course, they also had a different perception of their right brain perception was much more active in that time. And so they were almost a different species of human. And they actually had the ability to perceive these with their vision and their senses in a much deeper way, because they were much more connected to nature as we are, but in a much deeper way where they weren't separate as much. And so when they found these sacred power spots, they would mark them with stones or obelisks, and then that would become either a menhir or a gate or some type of thing that would eventually, maybe they would make a mound, and then eventually those became things like pyramids over time.
And I found, and you know, through all of the retreats that I host and the places that I feel drawn to, that's what is happening. You know, I literally was just at a mound in the UK that was a man-made mound, but had a very energetic significance, and you can feel that walking up to it, right? You can feel that as you go into the land, and I'm always so surprised by how much and how profound the energy is, and actually how like magical. You kind of forget that life is magical, and all these different synchronicities of whether you see all the numbers or animals or literally you all of a sudden have a brilliant moment of insight coming from being in that land. So I can't imagine being someone from like 4,000 years ago where you were always barefoot on the earth, deeply connected to the electromagnetic field of the earth, like no cell phones, you know, no to-do list. You're not like having to stress out about errands, and you're just being really present with living, and also experiencing this profound energy where you were actually guided by the energy of all that is like that universal life force energy. And because in modern society we've blocked ourselves, first of all, and the structure of society has blocked us, and what we've created with these buildings made of like, you know, concrete and steel, and even if you look at just the way that the grid pattern of cities are, you know, That's why people are tired and stressed out and unhappy. That's why when you go to, like, say, my hometown, there's nothing. There's a power plant, a nuclear power plant, and there's strip malls. And that has the most concentrated usage of meth. And I realized
Wow.
is because they're so disconnected from nature, and everything's just a golf course, right? Like
Right.
completely stripped of the wild,
Yeah.
of connection with animals, and any land that is wild is just grass, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that really brings up a couple points for me too that I want to mention. One is that a lot of those vibrations that are emanated from a lot of that detrimental, thought forms and all of those different things all have a resonance with also all the electrosmog and all of the different harmful chemicals that we've introduced into our environment, and all of those actually are attracted to each other, just like anything that has a similar quality is attracted to it. But it's really interesting because it makes sense as we go deeper and realize why people are so sick. And it also just really reminds me that I think a lot of people are looking for a lot of things outside themselves when really a lot of these people knew how to connect with nature and their environment in a way that actually harmonized their environment and harmonized all of society. And I really believe that we can come back to something like that.
And speaking of that nature, it's those sacred structures of patterning. Like, even if we look at a leaf, or we look at a galaxy, if we look at a seashell, or if we look at the tides of the waves, there's always a pattern of frequency or vibration that specific energy or thing carries. And I think it's so fascinating. This is why I'm so fascinated with the biosignatures, is that it's also in us, like our liver and our adrenals and our lungs and our skin, and it all has a certain vibration, which actually is a pattern.
Yeah.
And so, talk more about that, if you could, about
Absolutely.
how it applies to us. And
Totally. Well, and one of the things that I think is really valuable about that too is one of the bases of what Ibrahim has developed is really that energy is what creates the shape of things, and then shape is actually what determines the function. So certain organs have certain functions based on their actual shape, just like you were talking about. And when that shape is actually, even funny enough, just based on the resonance of actually seeing a correctly drawn organ like a liver or a kidney or a heart actually has a certain vibrational quality to us already. But
just
then,
by viewing it.
Just by viewing it. But then what Ibrahim really spent a lot of time is actually mapping out the internal patterns that happen within those organs and the glands and all of those different things. And through a lot of that research too, really seeing that once this pattern was reintroduced into someone's body that may have gone through some type of disease process or some detrimental experience where they lost the ability for their body to really lock into that pattern and resonate with it, just by allowing them to see it or draw it or work with it really brought on this incredible healing effect. And even in my own life so far, just working with it heavily for the last 6 months and really, introducing it to friends and clients and different people that I feel like could really benefit from it, it's just blowing my mind because, it's something that's, I think is so powerful because it's also nonverbal. It's getting past a lot of these ideas and these stories that we've created about ourselves and what we're dealing with, and really brings it back to that original unified source energy that we all come from, that is truly
the co-creation with the universe. Because I think what happens with modern society is, like, we have this like checklist, like something isn't right, and so now then we go to the doctor, and then they prescribe us drugs, and then and I always laugh at those drug commercials because it's like, may cause internal bleeding and stroke and heart attack.
And they say it so fast you can barely hear it, and you're like, wow.
You're like, I think I just rather have this. I think I just rather have this thing,
Yeah,
this
totally.
other thing, But it's still masking and just putting a Band-Aid on the root cause, which is why I feel so deeply connected to Chinese medicine and to Ayurveda, is that you're looking at the root cause of the pattern of behavior instead of putting a Band-Aid, it's like, okay, great, yeah, you have the
Yeah.
inflammation, but the inflammation is not the problem. The inflammation is telling you that something is not aligned.
Yeah.
Something, the structure is off. And when it comes to even Chinese medicine principles, it's so interesting because they deduce it down to yin-yang theory, and yin-yang theory is super simple yet very complex. It's like something that's a disease could be a yin-based disease or a yang-based disease, and the yang-based diseases are things that happen sort of abruptly, like you accidentally trip and you fall and you break your leg. That's a yang. It's like an explosive, fast, quick experience that creates an imbalance. And then we have a yin-based diseases, which is chronic stuff, which is cancer. And that comes from the patterning of our lifestyle, the patterning of what we eat, the patterning of our emotions, the patterning of our habits, the patterning of our community.
Yeah.
And so Chinese medicine really looks at that. And in a different way, they fixed it through the root of whether that's the internal organs or they look at the emotional aspect.
Yeah.
But I love this because this adds another layer, another dimension to the many faceted layers of the planes of being a human, right?
Totally.
We have the physical, then we have the emotional, then we have the astral, and then we have the causal, then we have, and so now we're looking at the energetics that we can't see, and sometimes we can't even feel, but there is something off.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really cool because, one of my mentors that I was telling you about has taught me so much about traditional Chinese medicine and just the different practices. And even actually in the Czech Institute, we go quite a bit into yin and yang and understanding the polarity and duality of things and how to really bring someone back to balance. And what biogeometry really brings that I feel like really piggybacks on that, but even in a really interesting way, is because it's a centering effect, it's a centering, harmonizing effect of the subtle bodies. It actually, whether someone is too active or too sedated, it actually brings them back to that center, which is so powerful because it's like, I mean, just even myself, like someone that likes to work out all the time, it takes a lot of like Qigong and all sorts of different modalities to bring me back to like, okay, I'm actually feeling balanced. And I don't think, like, I don't want people to get the wrong idea that it's like a way of like hacking the system, because I don't think it is. I think it's actually just part of the technology of our body that we have to remember and actually come back to as just another tool. It's like it's everything.
Yeah, and by the way, I actually had the privilege of having a session with Adam. And so recently, a little backstory was I had been through a few months ago a very difficult breakup, and I hadn't even told you at this point. And he was going through the chakra system of my body, and we get to the heart, and then it gets all funky.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because the chakra system is all vortices of energy, right? And so he was saying that, when it's healthy, it goes clockwise, and it's like a nice big full circle, and then when it's unhealthy, it stops, or it goes in the other direction, or it goes up and down. And so mine was going all kinds of wonky. And when he said, "Oh, your heart chakra is out of balance," I was like, "What?" Then I told you, and you go, "Oh, well, that makes sense."
Totally.
And so when you actually reharmonize it, I did feel like, remember I told you I was like, "Oh,
almost
something."
like electric.
It was like
charge
an
or
electric
something
charge that like shocked my heart. And it's so subtle though. It's very, very subtle, and maybe it's on a subconscious level, but because of that subtle shift, right? We're able to process things better.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm
it creates
realizing.
like a clear channel.
Yeah.
That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, because it was
absolutely.
stuck, and it was in an unhealthy, repetitive pattern.
Yeah.
And then bringing it back, and then from there it was like, oh, then everything else started to flow again. But it's so interesting, and so tell me more about how it actually, like, I want you to share with them how you do it when
absolutely.
it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, well, we could even make a demonstration of it, but really, because it's based on a lot of the work of the Egyptian temple sciences as well as French radiesthesia and what at early parts of the 1900s was called medical radiesthesia, and once again, like biogeometry doesn't use that term because it doesn't want to be associated with the medical field or even alternative medicine. It really is about environmental energy balancing. But what's so fascinating about it is that we learn some of the techniques from the radiesthesia where we're going through the actual correctly drawn anatomy charts, and we're tuned into the personal wavelength by a certain pendulum. And it's very interesting, even just the physical radiesthesia from the French is very based on a clear mind state awareness where we're detecting a vibrational reality in front of us rather than asking a mental question. And so we're really detecting certain vibrational qualities. And so with the neutral pendulum, I'm tuned into your personal wavelength by either a photograph or your own energetic field. And then I'm looking through the human body, and because it has a certain resonance, like we were talking about with the shapes also have a certain resonance. I like to describe it like a guitar string or another tuning fork, where you're hitting a tuning fork, and then a tuning fork that's tuned to the same frequency is going to resonate and vibrate. And so going through the human body, I'm actually using my clear mind state awareness to see where in the body might be stuck, and I can see that by not only the strength of the actual rotation of the pendulum that's created by a whole other subject, but like by the torsion of actually the energetic field that's creating that either energy is being gained or it's being lost. That's a very simple way to put it. But when energy is being lost, it starts to go counterclockwise. So you can see, like, for instance, when I was looking at your heart, I could see that there was some kind of disturbance or some type of thing going on there. And so then after I look through all of the different parts of the body, that sometimes I'm intuitively led, sometimes I'll ask people, sometimes I like to also just kind of go through and then see if it correlates with what people are actually experiencing. But then I'm going through all of the biosignatures that Ibrahim has so beautifully created and also just so generously shared with us. And also just like a shout out, there's a public book that you can get that really talks more about this. Called the BioGeometry Signatures. But it's so cool because then you can learn to actually resonate with certain biosignatures, not only yourself, but when I'm doing the work on, for instance, when I was working on you, I'm looking through the biosignatures and also using that same kind of clear mind state awareness. So I'm not asking any mental questions. I'm just tuned into your personal wavelength, and I'm using my other hand to actually use my attention to look at that signature. And because it's in a neutral position, I can see when it's strengthening because it'll start rotating automatically without me doing a single thing other than just holding it.
Yeah, show them.
Yeah, exactly. They look...
So they look like this.
Yes. And it's so interesting because, as soon as I feel it, especially now that I've been doing it for a little while, I can really feel when it starts resonating with someone's energy field, because it not only turns the pendulum, but I can actually feel it coming, like a certain sensation. And it's like helping that person, or you in that case, where it's helping them actually remember that energetic signature that's already innately there since we were born into this physical incarnation. But each one, there's so many different layers to it, but they all have different vibrational qualities that actually not only work best in certain combinations, like for instance in the hepatitis C research project, they noticed that not just the liver biosignatures were needed, they actually needed to be in tandem with the heart biosignatures and some other ones, because just that natural synergy of our body working correctly relies on all the different organ systems and all the different pathways. And so it really helps clear that energetic disturbance and remember it, but at the same time it's also working on many different dimensional levels rather than just the physical. So for some people that are very sensitive, they feel it right away, kind of like you did. Sometimes people might not feel much at all, but then throughout the day or even the next day, I get a text, that it's like, wow, I'm really feeling super calm. And, I have a lot of people tell me how calm they feel a lot, which is like probably the number one adjective I get every time I've done this work. But it really is fascinating because it really reminds me a lot of what I feel like I innately know through music and tuning into the resonance and the pulse of creation that we all are a part of, but just really tapping into that in a different way.
Yeah, and the harmony of nature. And I think when you say, people always say how calm they feel, that's when we are our most powerful, when we are in a state of like present and our nervous system is regulated.
Yeah.
It's so simple. When we are relaxed, then we are able to receive the gifts of life. We're able to make clear decisions. We're able to become balanced, and it's so interesting, like with all of the different signature patterns, like, you know how you said a blend of different ones create and support that one, say the heart or the liver.
Yeah.
And that's the way Chinese medicine works as well. And even Chinese medicine herbs, like a lot of people will say, oh, well, this herb is really good for hair growth, which is the most popular thing amongst my friends.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I want to have long hair. And I tell them, you can't just have this one herb. It has to be a blend so that it supports the structure of that herb, but it also doesn't deplete and clog up the other organs in your body, because you know, for example, Hishu Wu is really good for your kidneys, but also is kind of tough on your liver, so you need stuff for your liver to be able to balance that out. And that's sort of just reflective of everything in life. Like, we can't just take one aspect. And even in our physical body, you know, the trend right now is having a huge, nice booty, and you know, in the Brazilian butt lift, and it's like, it doesn't look right when it's just this big butt and then their legs are little sticks, right? It just doesn't work that way. It's how can we utilize not even just biogeometry signatures, but just everything in life to be in a state of balance so that it actually holds and supports all the things that you actually want. You know, whether that's a really beautiful love life, or a house, or maybe you're trying to have a kid, or whatever it is, or maybe you're wanting to manifest like a dream job, or all this stuff. It's like, you can't leave other aspects of yourself behind in sacrifice for this other thing, because first of all, if you do get it, it's going to crumble. It's not going to last long. And if you don't, I talked about this with someone today, how it's actually scarcity mindset. It's like, oh, in order to have this, I must sacrifice this part of me. Whereas it's like, maybe we can actually have everything. And in a state of balance and in a state of harmony. And that's where, you know, that's where the movements come in. Like, I feel that with the biogeometry signatures, you're really working on these astral, energetic, etheric planes, which is so magical. Right? It's magical. When I say magical, I say that because there's no physical proof. You can't just go and have some sort of fancy monitor where you're like, oh, now your liver's now, right? But you can't help but feel that shift. And that's what makes it magical. And that's why I love the complexity and the art of energy. It's an art to me.
Absolutely. Well, and it's where art and science meet. I really feel like, absolutely. Well, and a little bit about that too, like something that's so fascinating about this work too, that they talk a lot about in the classes, is that a lot of these people, like, you may not perceive it instantaneously, or even if you feel better, what's really cool with like some of the research projects is that when you do certain things like blood test analysis or EEGs, and you're looking at different brainwave states, they do shift really quite quickly actually with this type of work, which is just really fascinating. It's like, you know, I mean, it definitely doesn't make the medical industrial complex happy to know that, you know, Ibrahim helped win the hepatitis C research project with a chip that has, you know, a bunch of funny shapes on it that did better than most of the pharmaceutical drugs, but it's because it's using that wisdom of nature's design language. You know, it's like you were saying, it's like that, coming back to that intuition and that heart-centered intellect that actually is truly where we come from. But we're so mental these days that we're like, okay, how are we going to get a quick fix? You know, this movement stuff is cool, but like, what can I do today? You know, and it's like, I respect that, you know, like I guess we're souls that came at a certain time to experience that, but it's really,
and of course it doesn't really help feed the pharmaceutical industry, right? And again, all of those pharmaceuticals and all of those drugs, it's not stable, it's not long lasting. There's always the cause and effect
Yeah.
And that's because they're stripping away the wholeness, the totality of the different elements that are required in order to sustain something really healthy and to aid in that realignment and harmonization of whatever it is that they're wanting to cure. And I think that's also why it's so important not to dismiss the body, the physical body either, because I find that a lot of people deep in the spiritual world, right, they always want to go into the astral. They always want to, they're like, oh, I just can, sometimes it's the other end of the spectrum where all they want to do is meditate their sickness away. But we actually have to be able to integrate it into our physical flesh because we are not separate from our flesh.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I find that a lot of people spend way too long ignoring the physical symptoms, like being in pain becomes a norm, having slouching shoulder. I've had so many people say, oh, but my spine is just this way. And, I'm like, I don't think your spine is just this way. I think it's a pattern of behavior that has created this slouching spine or this weak back. And so when we talk about Guan Jing and how we incorporate the spiraling circular shapes within Guan Jing, is that we're starting to materialize these energetic principles into a physicality, which not only specifically can target an organ, which I have practices that target maybe the lower dantian, or maybe we talk about the heart or the stomach, but it also allows us to gain strength and kind of come back into coordination of all of our body and be able to orchestrate energy in a way where we start to believe that it really exists. We start to feel it viscerally through our movements. We feel the wind, the way the texture of the wind moves through our hands. Sometimes I personally love practicing Guan Jing in the water, and you feel that texture of that movement in the water, which is really, really powerful. And so it's about all the different layers being recognized and not being stuck on just one aspect, not just being stuck on going to the gym and being as strong as possible, but you can't even bend over to pick up something off the ground.
Well,
you know?
It goes back to that yin-yang balance too, and and something that's super amazing about your practice that I think I've, over time, as I've been more exposed to qigong and then coming back through the eyes of this type of work, is seeing that actually, like, any type of motion that we're doing is creating an energy key. It's creating like an actual movement that moves on a physical level, and especially as like a more like left brain type person at times, like I'd be doing qigong and like I feel good, but then I'm like, is this really doing something? You kind of get into that like silly mindset.
The doubt.
Yeah, the doubt. And then as I've surrendered to that, and not only in the practice, but then also being able to see through like certain vibrational detection tools that I now have, and actually seeing that like when you have your hands out like this, you're actually activating that heart chakra center, or as you move through it, like in a cleansing breath, you're actually cleansing all of the chakras. So it makes so much sense as I'm able to see it with like as such a visual kinesthetic type of learner, that I just think is so cool that you're helping people get back into that, because I just feel like the spiraling is the natural, even from what I've learned more and more I go into anatomy, like our actual entire fascial system is all spirals, and like the way that we're meant to move is in a spiraling fashion, but we're like so like front, back, left, right, twisting is like a huge deal, it's like, and it's like kind of like, it's just like so compartmentalized, and
and it's amazing to see how something like these shapes that are on just like this on this page can be brought into an energetic resonance in the body, and then how you can actually physically become this shape through the movement. And then you're now moving with that shape, which I found so fascinating, where I haven't even looked at that book much at this point when I was creating Guan Jing. And I remember when I first opened this book and I'm looking and I go, what? But this is this movement, and then this is this movement that I made, and
so
wow,
great.
And it's just so funny, and it's wild because when I structure my sequencing of my classes, I have abbreviations for each movement, which becomes a drawing of a shape.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at some of these shapes and I'm laughing because they look very similar to what's on here. And and it was something that was channeled, and it's undeniable what we feel viscerally and what we know by just being in contact with nature and the cycles of nature and the rise and fall of the sun. That's why it's so important to rise and fall with the sun, right? And
Totally.
to be in the rhythm of the waves and not fighting against it when you're in the ocean, and really allow and surrender to that flow. Because I feel like a lot of times the people who, and you kind of see them at the park or on a hike, the ones who aren't really exposed to nature, there's this like weird resistance, and they're like, you know, they're a little
like
fearful.
Very rigid, yeah. Like, well, yeah. Well, like it makes me think too of just the groundedness that comes through actually moving in the physical body, and all of those tactics. Like, I think one of the things that just the way my brain works, it's like I feel like I have so much deep, like, trust and love for the unknown and like the entire etheric realm. But then when it comes to, I think one of the things I found so valuable in like the Czech system and so many systems that really value the interface of both, and how the physical is a reflection of the mental and emotional, and that's a reflection of the spiritual, but also the other way around. And it's like sometimes, or not even sometimes, I feel like a lot of people need to become embodied in that actual physical self. Like if you're not moving and spending time outside in nature and hydrating and breathing correctly, like how good is a meditation practice really going to serve you? You know, it's like that's like the existential question that I started asking myself, and I felt so appreciative of being around grounded people that are like, maybe they're like grew up on a farm, or they're like a carpenter. I can like feel that they just know how to be in their body, and that makes them that much more trustworthy for me to be able to like trust in their spiritual knowledge, because I realize, oh my gosh, they actually are embodying both, you know, where sometimes, and I really, it's like, I mean it with love, because like everybody has their own journey through their body, but there's too many times in my experience where I would hear these amazing things that people are saying, but when I looked at like their body, or even now as I perceive their energetic field, it didn't feel like it was matching what they were telling me. And as I've been more and more exposed to people that are kind of balanced on both ends, and everyone, I mean,
everyone has their journey, right?
Everyone has their journeys, but it's like, so it's like no judgment at all, but it's like, it's been this deep process for me to realize how much I also like, you know, it's like people can overdo it, but when I meet some guy that I can tell clearly works out and like is grounded in his physical body, I have a little bit more just natural innate trust in what he's saying to me, because whatever he's doing, if he's not using drugs or some type of, you know, shortcut, he's probably doing some things that I would like to cross-reference.
And there's some stuff, honestly, all those shortcuts to looking more vital actually aren't sustainable either, right? All the sort of outer stuff, whether that is doing steroids or whatever have you, for, you know, for a lot of women, it's makeup, right? And for both men and women, it's now all this plastic surgery. But what actually is the vitality that they are seeking, that we all wish to seek, is this luminance that seeps through underneath the surface of the skin. And in Chinese medicine, this is our Shen. This is how much our soul is shining out through our skin, through our eyes, the brightness of our eyes, the presence of our eyes, being able to hold good eye contact, you know, and the tonality of our voice, having a smooth, even, calm, consistent voice. And those things you can't really fake.
No.
And I think that this is where we're at a tipping point in society, where people are now finally starting to realize the importance of these practices that integrate a deeper soulful connection with nature, as well as being in harmony with our emotions, as well as being in balance with our physical body and our purpose, our life's purpose. So yeah, I feel like there's so much to talk about.
There's always so much to talk about with you.
I'm sure we're gonna do another YouTube video, but I wanted to close off this this beautiful little session together by just sharing. You know, you have an incredible podcast. I'll put it in the comments in the description. I have a free intro class if any of you are curious about the movement form, and there's also privates that Adam offers for his BioGeometry signatures, as well as I have the Guan Jing membership that is on a monthly basis, and you get access to hundreds of different classes, everything from 20-minute quick ones to 2-hour yin, juicy, stretching body opening. But we're both spiraling and circular.
Yes, absolutely.
If that's a word.
Absolutely, because my thing too is I'm really trying to bring a lot of the knowledge that I've gained in these classes in biogeometry to all the movement practices and, understanding of how that connects to our food and what we put into our body, but also, our mindset and our clarity of thought and our goals. A lot of time, like, we are here all with a unique purpose, and when we can really embody that through whatever practice it takes to get to that, it's really like I call it a remembering, where we're actually remembering what we originally knew all along when we came here.
In yoga, that's called smarana.
Smarana,
remembrance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you all so much.
Yes,
I hope
thank
you enjoyed our talk, and we'll see you soon.